Welcome. I would like to welcome you to another episode of the Unpopular Podcast. This is the man, the myth, the legend, Jalen Hunter. If you do me a favor, please subscribe to wherever you're listening. Please subscribe to wherever you're watching. It definitely means a lot to me. So on Sunday, we got one of the most exciting Super Bowls I think we've ever seen. Was it the best Super Bowl? And we'll talk about this a little later. Was it the best Super Bowl? No. Was it the best halftime show? No. But we got an exciting Super Bowl. And I was wondering, going into the Super Bowl, I was like, why? There's a lot of great buzz around the Super Bowl. Now, of course, I'm not saying there isn't always a lot of great buzz around the Super Bowl, but I was wondering why it's a lot of positive buzz. And here's what I mean by that. If you look at most Super Bowls, there's usually a villain. There's usually a team that nobody really wants to see win. If you look about last year, nobody really wanted to see, so a lot of people didn't want to see Tom Brady beat Patrick Mahomes, and then there was a lot of people that wanted to see Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs lose. The year before that, nobody really wanted Jimmy Garoppolo to beat the young Patrick Mahomes. Almost every time Tom Brady's in the Super Bowl, people want him to lose. There's always a villain. There's always a team that nobody really wants to win. And this was different. I think everyone there was nobody was like, I hate Cincinnati, man. I need Cincinnati to lose. There was really nobody that said, I hate the LA Rams. I need them to lose. And that's because of stories. There's so many stories that was attached to the Super Bowl. There's so many stories coming out of the Super Bowl. Let me first start by saying congratulations to the Los Angeles Rams for winning the Super Bowl. They beat the LA Rams. They beat the Cincinnati Bengals 23-20. Of course, we'll dissect the whole game, but shouts out to the Rams for beating the Cincinnati Bengals. But like I said, there was a lot of stories that were connected to the Super Bowl. Let's look on the Cincinnati side first. You had first of all, one of the youngest teams to ever make it to the Super Bowl. One of the most likable teams. I mean, you had Joe Burrow, Joe Cool, Joe Shiesty, whatever you wanted to call him. You had Jamar Chase. You had you had Zach Taylor, who was one of the youngest, if not the youngest coach to ever be in the Super Bowl, I think. Or I think this was the youngest coaches going head to head. Like, it was just the city of Cincinnati, which was going into the Super Bowl, I think 0-2. Now, unfortunately, 0-3. But people were rooting for the Cincinnati Bengals. People wanted to see a team that didn't know what they didn't know. They kept saying that. Joe Burrow said that we don't know. A team that really wasn't supposed to be here. A team that, I mean, look at their path. They went up against the Oakland Raiders, and a lot of people were talking about the whole whistle that didn't really count. Then you had to go up against, who did they play after? Oh, the Tennessee Titans, which was the number 1 overall seed in the AFC. They pretty much, I'm not going to say this, they pretty much dismantled them, especially with their defense. Then they go into Arrowhead and beat the Kansas City Chiefs in overtime. And then you get to the Super Bowl. Like, this team had one of the most unpredictable runs we've ever seen. And it was led by a quarterback that had to go in the transfer portal in college. Didn't really work in Ohio State. First year at LSU was bad. Second year had one of the all-time greatest teams in college football history. Won the national championship. Won the Heisman. First overall pick, and now hurts himself, or gets hurt the first year, pretty much tears up his knee, and comes back and makes it to the Super Bowl. Like, the Cincinnati Bengals had so many storylines, and they didn't really have a villain. They didn't have that, oh no, I don't want to see them win. Like, and the same thing for the Rams. When you look at the Rams, you had Matthew Stafford, who went to Georgia, was a high draft pick. His career was dying pretty much in Detroit. Even though he was putting up Hall of Fame numbers, he just wasn't producing wins because of it's Detroit. Their Super Bowl was pretty much Christmas. Oh no, Thanksgiving. You had Odell Beckham Jr. We remember the catch in New York. Remember all the injury after injury after injury that we saw in New York, and then he goes to Cleveland. That completely didn't work. It wasn't his fault, but that completely didn't work. And now he's with LA. Von Miller, who is a Super Bowl MVP already, Super Bowl champion. Then he started getting hurt in Denver, and then that Denver, it's Aaron Darnold, arguably one of the greatest defensive players we've ever seen. Has all the awards: Rookie of the Year, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, All Pro, and then he just didn't have the Super Bowl champion. There was just so many storylines, and this Super Bowl didn't have a villain. But let's talk up, and because of that, I think there was so many pendulum swings even in the game. Let me first start by saying how. Let's talk about the game. Let's talk about the game. Let me first start by saying the Rams played a good game. The game went exactly. How am I going to phrase this? The game was dictated exactly how I thought it was going to be dictated. Did it go exactly how I thought it was going to go? No. But it was dictated the exact way I thought it would be dictated. Now, if you remember last episode, I said it was going to be 27-24. I thought the Rams were going to win by 3. While I didn't have the score right, I did have the margin right. Matthew Stafford didn't have the greatest game. In fact, the Rams offense in general didn't have the greatest game, and that is because of Odell Beckham Jr. First and foremost, I'm so happy that Odell Beckham Jr. got a ring. I'm not one of those people that everyone's crapping on Odell Beckham, but people were putting unfair criticism on Odell Beckham Jr. Now, do I think that he is a top wide receiver in the league? No, not anymore, at least, due to the amount of injuries that he has sustained in his career. But I do think that he can be, at his best, is still a top 10 receiver in the league. It's just you need to get him in a situation like the Rams, where I don't know if he's a number 1 receiver anymore. However, he could possibly be the best number 2 receiver in the league when healthy. And I'm just so happy for Odell Beckham Jr. getting the ring. I mean, you saw he was crying on the sidelines after they won. He was crying with with the mother of his child, or soon to be mother of his child. It was a great moment, man. But the Rams offense did not look good most of the entire game due to Odell Beckham Jr. And this is what I mean about, and we talk about a lot, game plan. You go into a game with a game plan, and 9.8 times out of 10, your game plan is going to get scrapped some way, somehow, whether one of your best players get hurt, it's not working, the defense is changing or making you change how you address that game plan. Your game plan more than likely is not going to work. And the game plan was, you can tell early on, the game plan was for the Rams, they're going to double Cooper Kupp. Get the ball to Odell Beckham Jr. I mean, you saw Odell Beckham Jr. had 2 receptions, 52 yards, and a touchdown. And it was looking, I feel if Odell Beckham stayed in the game, it would not be as close as 23-20. I felt Odell Beckham Jr. alone was snatching the momentum, and he wasn't letting it go. But we talk about game plan. So Odell Beckham Jr. gets hurt. They're saying that it's more than likely a torn ACL, which I hope for a speedy recovery. It's especially sucks because you tear your ACL in the last game of the year, like literally the last game of the year, and that's usually a 12-month process or 12-month recovery time. And now, of course, you can be like a Cam Akers or Adrian Peterson and come back hella early, which, you don't know everyone's body is differently. So I just hope for a speedy recovery. I hope he comes back. I don't think that this is going to dictate. I will say this. I don't think this is going to dictate the demand for Odell Beckham Jr. because of how successful this year was, seeing as though once you leave Cleveland and go to LA and he just flourished. I think he had like 7 or 8, maybe even 9 touchdowns just in LA when he only had like 4 or 5, or like 5 or 6 in Cleveland. So I don't think the demand for Odell Beckham Jr. is going to dissipate due to injury, but I do think the amount of money that he could possibly get, because you're probably not getting Odell Beckham Jr. for next year, seeing as though he's going to be rehabbing. And it's unfortunate, man. I don't want to, especially. And then, of course, the conversation was brought on because it was a non-contact injury about turf and grass. I say this, man. If the record shows that artificial turf, players that play on artificial turf hurt themselves more than they do when they play on grass, as a league, you need to address that. Now, I don't have the data in front of me. I don't know what the data is. But there is something to be said that once Odell Beckham Jr. went down, former athlete after former athlete after current athlete after current athlete after current athlete came out and said more than likely it was due, like this wouldn't have happened if he wasn't playing on artificial turf. Now, I get the allure of artificial turf as far as for the NFL, it looks good. It's probably cheaper to maintain than real grass. But, again, this is the league. And, again, if the record shows that players are getting hurt more on artificial turf than they are on grass, you have to make the change. So, I hope for a speedy recovery for Odell Beckham Jr., man. I really do, because he's a great player, and he could be one of the best players in the league when healthy and when, as we see with the Rams, when put in the right opportunity. But let's go back to the Super Bowl. Let's go back to game plan. Odell Beckham Jr. goes out. So you think, okay, Odell Beckham Jr. goes out. We're pretty much rolling at this point. What does Odell Beckham Jr. mean for the game once he goes out? It means, okay, now the defense has to say, all right, we were about to have to figure out what's going to happen between Odell Beckham Jr. and Cooper Kupp. Now we can solely focus on Cooper Kupp and make somebody else beat us. Tyler Higbee wasn't playing. I think their backup tight end hurt his shoulder. The run game, and we'll talk about the run game for both teams, but the run game was so unsuccessful. I mean, Cam Akers had 13 rushes for 21 yards, an average of 1.6 yards. Darrell Henderson had 4 rushes for 7 yards. Sonny Michel had 2 rushes for 2 yards. Cooper Kupp had 1 rush for 7 yards. So the rushing game was not happening. So as a defense, you say, all right, Odell Beckham Jr. is not in the game. Because Odell Beckham Jr. was lighting us up. I mean, he had two catches. He had 2 catches, and he had a touchdown. He was lighting us up. So now we can focus our attention on Cooper Kupp. We can double him. We can triple him if we need to and make somebody else beat us. Like I said, Tyler Higbee wasn't playing. Their backup tight end, I think, hurt his shoulder. So it's really on a player like Van Jefferson. And boy, if you want to know, you know why people usually say like injured players are MVPs or should be MVP considerations? Because look what happens when they go out. For instance, and I'm not saying that Odell Beckham Jr. is on this level, but at least anymore. But Kevin Durant goes down for Brooklyn. Kevin Durant goes down, and they proceed to lose 11 straight games. Even with James Harden, even with a part-time Kyrie Irving, they proceed to lose 11 straight games, which has since been snapped. But they have stayed. You remember what Golden State looked like without Steph Curry last year. Or, 2 years ago. You remember you can see what they look like without Draymond Green. There are MVP. That's why people that are out, people that usually say, hey, well, LeBron James, if he doesn't play the whole season, should be considered MVP because any team that LeBron James is not on or any team that LeBron James is on and he's out due to injury looks considerably worse than they do with him. There's a difference between being a third option when you have an incredible first option and an incredible second option, which then having to slide and be a second option. What does that mean? Van Jefferson. First of all, congratulations, Van Jefferson, for not only winning a Super Bowl, but now the birth of your son. I think his wife went into labor in the middle of the game and was rushed to the hospital. She instructed them not to tell him until the game was over. He rushed and he made it. So, and from what has been reported, it's a healthy baby boy. So, shouts out to them. Damn, now I proceed to talk about him in an unflattering light. But look at the structure of this team. Look at the structure of the Rams in the beginning of the year. You had Cooper Kupp, who was a number 1. You had Robert Wood, who was a number 2. Then you had Van Jefferson, who was a number 3. Oh, well, you can argue that Van Jefferson was a number 3 because you also had Tyler Higbee, which was a highly productive tight end. Then you go in the middle of the season, or once they acquire Odell Beckham Jr. Unfortunately, Robert Wood goes out for the season. Now you have Cooper Kupp as number 1. You have Odell Beckham Jr. as a number 2. And you still have Van Jefferson or Tyler Higbee as a number 3. Flash forward now to the Super Bowl. Van Jefferson has been a number 3 or 4 this entire season. Now he is thrusted into a position, you need him at a position that he is not used to being, which is a number 2. And for people that think, what's the difference between number 2 and number 3? Like, there's really should be no difference. They're still football players. He's still a wide receiver. The difference between a number 2 and number 3 is this. Let me give you an example. Andrew Wiggins. Andrew Wiggins was the number 1. And in fact, look at the trajectory of Andrew Wiggins' career. Andrew Wiggins was a number 1 because he was a number 1 overall draft pick. Then he slides to a number 2 when Karl Anthony Towns comes to the Timberwolves. He wasn't that good, number 1. He really was not that good at all, honestly, as a number 1. He had so much upside, but he wasn't that good because there's a difference between being a number 1 player and a number 2 player. Once he goes to a number 2 player, he plays a little better, but it doesn't produce wins. And it's pretty much 1A, 1B with him and Karl Anthony Towns. He's not as successful. He's not that good. Because there's a lot of expectation that comes with a number 1 or a number 2. He goes to Golden State. He is a number 3. Arguably number 4. Right now, number 3 with Draymond Green being out, but arguably number 4. Andrew Wiggins is having the best season of his career. He is an all-star. That is the difference. There's not a lot asked of you. There's not as much asked from you being a number 2 than a number 3 than number 1. People outside of sports just think it's just numbers, but it's not. Think about it. Steph Curry is a number 1. Look how much pressure is put on, or look how much attention. In fact, Steph Curry is a number one, Klay Thompson is a number two. Look how much pressure is put, or look how much attention is put on Steph Curry compared to Klay Thompson. While they both draw a lot of attention, there is a considerable amount of more attention for Steph Curry than there is for Klay Thompson. When we go to the Super Bowl, there's a considerable amount of amount of attention that went to Odell Beckham Jr. than it did to Van Joseph. So now that you put Van Joseph at the number 2 position, now defenses have to adjust to you. Instead, okay, you go from, we're gonna let if they beat us because Van Joseph gets 10 receptions for 200 yards. Hey, they just beat us because our game plan is to stop Odell Beckham Jr. and Cooper Kupp. Now it goes from that to, all right, we stopping Cooper Kupp. We cannot let Van Joseph goes off. You see how that sounds different? And I go around all that to say Van Joseph did not have the best game. He had 4 receptions for 23 yards. But the thing about that was he could not create separation. Goes back to game plan. Goes back to what happens when your game plan, when ish hits the fan. The Rams needed Van Joseph to be a number 2 when he's not a number 2. And that is the reason why the Rams offense, it really wasn't because of Matthew Stafford. Now, yes, Matthew Stafford did have 2 interceptions, but it was because your game plan was thrown off and the person that you thrusted up was not ready for that moment. There's a reason. There's also a thing called momentum, and we talk about that ad nauseum on this podcast. Hell, I tweeted this going into the half. The failed kick. I think the failed kick for the Rams, the kicker bobbled, or the holder bobbled the ball, and they did not go into the game, or they didn't go into halftime with a bigger lead. And I said that drive looks eerily similar to the drive that ended, or the drive before halftime with the Kansas City Chiefs and the Cincinnati Bengals. Because momentum. Yes, it's just 3 points, but there's a difference between dominating the first half and going into the second half after scoring a field goal, instead of dominating the first half and then you're about to score and you don't. So now, and the defense stops you. So now it's like, hey, we just stopped them. So now, and then the defense gets the ball to start the second half. It's crazy. So there's a reason for momentum, because once Cincinnati came out that second half, and T. Higgins scores that touchdown. Now, yes, it was one of the most blatant offensive face masks I've ever seen in my life. T. Higgins pretty much grabbed Jalen Ramsey's face mask and swung him. Didn't call it for some reason. I don't know how the hell you didn't see that, but T. Higgins scores. Oh, shoot. Now we're only up by this much. And then they come down. Joe Mixon throws a touchdown. Now we're up. And for a while, it looked like, again, it took a minute. And it took a minute for the Rams to figure out, how the hell are we going to beat this team? There's a lot of credit that needs to be given to the Cincinnati Bengals defense. The Cincinnati Bengals defense played their best game of the year. Yes, they did lose, but they played their best game of the year. And they pretty much neutralized the rushing game. They neutralized the rushing game for the Rams. The rushing game that would have helped, seeing as though Odell Beckham Jr. wasn't there, would have helped with Cam Akers, with Henderson. with Sonny Michel, it was completely neutralized. Like they weren't, the Rams were getting nothing. And we'll talk about the difference between the Rams rushing and the Cincinnati Bengals rushing, but the Cincinnati Bengals defense was incredible when it came to stopping the rush. But the Rams offense was not clicking at all until the fourth quarter. And then you saw Matthew Stafford. I mean, Matthew Stafford was connecting to Cooper Kupp. And there's something that has to be said when you know where the ball is going and it still gets there. There's that is incredible. That's talent on the quarterback. That's talent on the receiver. You know Odell Beckham Jr. is not there. Van Jefferson is not having a good game in the slightest. The run game isn't working. You know where the ball is going. Cooper Kupp, Offensive Player of the Year this year, pretty much had a triple crown as far as I think receiving yards, touchdowns, and receiving yards, touchdowns, and I think completions. You knew it was going to Cooper Kupp, and you still couldn't stop it. Cooper Kupp. I don't know if I want to. I don't need to. They've been killing Eli Apple. They have been, man. We need to really check on Eli Apple and his mental health, because it wasn't just like people on social media like me and somebody random. It was like NFL players were killing Eli Apple. Gave up the game-winning touchdown. Man. But the Rams, this game was won for the Rams by their defense and their defensive pressure. And the exact thing that I said, the exact reason why I said I thought the Rams were going to win is pretty much how they won. Their offense, if it wasn't for their defense, they would have lost. And I know that's easy to say, but Aaron Donald took over the game. He had two, and I know, I mean, when you look at it, I know it doesn't sound like spectacular. I mean, Aaron Donald had 2 sacks and four tackles, I believe. But you got to look at when those tackles happen, when those sacks happen. The Cincinnati Bengals were rolling. And honestly, if it wasn't for a couple of those hurry-ups, a couple of those tackles, and those two sacks, there's a good possibility that not only Cincinnati Bengals score again, but look at the last play. I know we're jumping around a little bit, but look at the last play. Joe Burrow's rushing. Aaron Donald gets through. If you look at the screenshot that's circulating around the media, circulating around social media, Jamar Chase beat Jalen Ramsey. Jamar Chase was open. If Joe Burrow had just a second more, a millisecond more, and he saw Jamar Chase, that more than likely would have been 6. And we would be talking about a completely different outcome. That is just how disruptive Aaron Donald and that defense was. I mean, Von Miller was incredible. Leonard Floyd was incredible. I said going into the game that this game is going to be dictated by the Rams' best unit, which is their defensive front, and the Cincinnati Bengals' worst unit, which is their offensive line. And as we saw, Joe Burrow got sacked 7 times that game. 7. Remember, he got sacked 9 times against the Tennessee Titans. He got sacked 7 times. And one of them, I think his leg bent back. So I'm sure after that he was playing hurt. And that's not me saying, hey, man, the only reason why they won, the only reason why the Rams won is because Joe Burrow was hurt. No, the only reason why the Rams won is because the Rams defensive line dominated, like literally dominated the Cincinnati Bengals offensive line. 7 times. I think he was sacked 19 times this entire 19 times the entire playoffs, which is like tied for, which is the most in NFL history, I believe. And I think from what I heard, he was sacked like 70 times this year or something like that. Now, I'm not one to say, I can't really say I told you so in this situation because of how great Jamar Chase was. I mean, Jamar Chase was leaps and bounds the best offensive rookie this year, especially being paired with Joe Burrow. But that's one of the biggest reasons, moments like this was one of the biggest reasons why I said, you know, I may not have drafted Jamar Chase because, look, you have Rashawn Slater, who was incredible for the Chargers. You had Penei Sewell, who was great for the Lions. You want to get Joe Burrow's coming off a year last year where he shattered his knee due to the lack of protection from the offensive line. So I'm like, why? You didn't, and for people that are Cincinnati fans, I understand that a lot of the offensive line was injured last year. There weren't this year, and they were trashed this year. Now, again, I'm not saying that looking back now, I would have drafted either Slater or Penei Sewell over Jamar Chase, but it would have looked a lot different if you had a Rashawn Slater or a Penei Sewell as on your offensive line. Now, I do also understand that it would look a lot different if you didn't have a Jamar Chase, but I'm just saying, I really fear for Joe Burrow's longevity in the league if you do not address. I almost feel like their first 3 draft picks and their first 3 moves in free agency has to be offensive line, because you have a franchise quarterback. You have a top 5 potential quarterback on your team. You need to give him protection, because this game would have been won if they would have been able to protect Joe Burrow. And they were not able to. He was sacked 7 times. 7 and I mean, Joe Burrow, what? He only had 263 yards, but that's also because he was running for his life most of the game. Also, we talk about game plan. One of the biggest, if you go back to the first time the Rams and Sean McVay were in the Super Bowl against the Patriots with Tom Brady and the Patriots, we talk about game plan because what do you do once your game plan doesn't work, or the defense makes you have to switch your game plan? And now we're going to go over to the Cincinnati Bengals side. But when you look at the Rams first time with Sean McVay and Jared Goff and Todd Gurley, when you look at their first stint in the Super Bowl, the Patriots completely neutralized their running game, made Todd Gurley so ineffective that they completely went away from the rush. Like, they just stopped rushing the ball. And that's the biggest reason why the New England Patriots won that Super Bowl. Because their game plan was to control the line of scrimmage, and their game plan was to make the LA Rams stop running the ball, and that's exactly what they did. Because the defensive front for the Patriots were just too much for the offensive line that was the Rams, and they had no rushing game. So what did they do? The Rams completely just ditched the rushing game and just had Jared Goff just completely throw the ball. Like, that's all he did was throw the ball, and it didn't work. Fast forward to this year. this Super Bowl, Sunday. Both defenses did a great job at stopping the run. Cam Akers was getting nothing. Sonny Michel was getting nothing. Joe Mixon was really getting nothing. Giovanni Bernard was getting nothing. I mean, we saw the big stop. I think it was 3rd and 1. They rushed Giovanni Bernard, and he pretty much goes straight into Aaron Donald's arms. Like, they were getting nothing. But the difference between this year and the first time that the Rams were in the Super Bowl with Sean McVay is they didn't give up on the run. No. 13 rushes for 21 yards. 1 rush for 7 yards. 4 rushes for 7 yards. Matthew Stafford had 3 rushes for 6 yards. Sonny Michel had 2 rushes for 2 yards. Those aren't going to break the bank. Those aren't going to run home and say, yeah, Ma, I had 13 rushes for 21. That's not going to make news. But what is going to make news is, even though the rush was not as effective as they wanted it to be, the Rams didn't stop rushing the ball. The Rams did not run away from the rush. And because of that, there was a lot of lanes that were able to be opened for receivers, because there was still a sense that they could still rush the ball because they didn't completely ditch the rush. Go to Cincinnati, they completely threw the rush away. Yes, Joe Mixon has 15 rushes, but outside of that, Samaje Perine had 2 for 0 yards. And most of Joe Mixon's 15 rushes were in the first half. To me, that was the biggest detriment and one of the biggest reasons why the Cincinnati Bengals, not the biggest, of course, their biggest was their offensive line couldn't stop the Rams' defensive line. But one of the biggest reasons they lost is because they completely ditched the run. They did exactly what the Rams did when they saw the New England Patriots the first time. Zach Taylor, there were a couple moments where, now again, first Super Bowl, young coach, and Sean McVay pretty much did the same thing the first time he was in the Super Bowl. It's just like, there was some plays it's like, yo, you're trying to get a little too cute. Just run the ball, bro. Just run the ball. I know it hasn't been working, but you need to run the ball more because this offensive, all right. Both these teams needed to rush the ball for different reasons. For the Rams, they needed to continue to rush the ball, which they did in certain spots, because it opens up more lanes for Cooper Kupp, for Van Joseph, who missed a lot of passes, for their passing game. The Cincinnati Bengals needed to rush the ball more because the offensive line could not protect Joe Burrow. And you can tell they had nothing for that defensive front when you have Joe Mixon at like the 5-yard line. They did trick plays because it wasn't working. Now, yes, Joe Mixon did throw the touchdown, I think to Tyler Boyd, but they needed to resort to that instead of, because I honestly believe if they would have gave it to Joe Burrow, that would not have worked. They needed to continue the Cincinnati Bengals need to continue to rush the ball, at least make the defense know that, okay, they haven't completely ran away from the run, because the offensive line is doing a piss poor job protecting your franchise quarterback in Joe Burrow. And you have players like Aaron Donald, who is arguably the greatest defensive player of all time, and Von Miller, who is already a Super Bowl MVP, barreling down to your quarterback. And the offensive line is being destroyed. Now, no. Do I think that Joe Mixon could have done something if he had more than 15 yards, I think he would have. I don't know if he would have scored, but I do think that the defense would have been a little different. Yeah, man. But both teams played a good game. From all that I just said, both teams played. It was an exciting Super Bowl, man. Again, I hope for a speedy recovery for Odell Beckham Jr. This really shows you I hope the Super Bowl shows you just how important Odell Beckham Jr. was when you look at the production that he had compared to the production that they had from any other receiver outside of Cooper Kupp, because no other receiver outside of Cooper Kupp and Odell Beckham could create separation. Which is why you saw Van Jefferson have 4 receptions, which is why you saw them having to continuously try to throw the ball to Darrell Henderson, who is a running back. And he had 3 receptions for 43 yards. He had more reception yards than Van Joseph, who they needed. So I hope and that's why I think Odell Beckham Jr. is going to, I'm not going to say receive a big payday, but he's going to be a huge target in free agency because of how important he was for this team. But it was a good Super Bowl, man. It was a good Super Bowl. I understand why Cooper Kupp won the Super Bowl MVP. I mean, he had 8 receptions for 92 yards, 2 touchdowns, one of which being the game-winning touchdown on Eli Apple. So I understand why, but I believe that it should have went to Aaron Donald. And I believe it should have went to Aaron Donald because I feel Aaron Donald's presence, and even though the number, 2 sacks and 4 tackles aren't eye-popping, you have to see those stats are deeper than the stat book. You have to see when those 2 sacks happen, when those 4 tackles happen, when the hurry-ups. Like Aaron Donald's energy completely shifted the game for the Cincinnati Bengals. We talk so much about how bad their offensive line was. Well, a lot of that was because Aaron Donald was getting past them, and he was bench pressing players. So while I understand why Cooper Kupp got it because he had the game-winning touchdown, I would have given the Super Bowl MVP to Aaron Donald, who, in my opinion, when it's all said and done, now there was reports that come out saying that he could retire, and he's contemplating retiring, pretty much retiring on top. We also heard the same reports about Sean McVay. In about 8 seasons, Aaron Donald will go down, to me, as the second best defensive player of all time, next to Lawrence Taylor. Yes, I think better than Reggie White. Aaron Donald, man, he does things. That's what, and Shannon Sharp said it best. That's why when people talk about Aaron Donald, they say he's the best player. He's arguably the best player in the league. Not the best defensive player, not the best, line or interior lineman. They say he is arguably the best player in the NFL. That's why when we talk about, some of the best players, of course, we throw in Patrick Mahomes, we throw in Tom Brady. When he was there, we throw in Aaron Rodgers. That's why Aaron Donald's name always comes up, because this is how good he is. He is a complete package for he's an interior lineman getting double and triple teams. An interior lineman getting double and triple teams. And he, to me, was the biggest factor. Was the biggest factor of the Super Bowl. And that's why I would have given him the Super Bowl MVP. But I understand why Cooper Kupp got it. And shouts out to Matthew Stafford, man. Matthew Stafford is a proof of what happens when you put a good player that was on a terrible franchise, terrible team, and you put him in a good franchise with a good team and good weapons and good protection at the offensive line. It took 1 year. That man, That man's career was rotting for years in Detroit. 1 year in LA, and he is now a Super Bowl champion. And he didn't even have the greatest game. Again, 26 for 40, 283 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Nothing to really scoff at, but he's a Super Bowl champion, and he is a big reason why they won. I mean, this really right. That's right. That's why they make the move. That's why you trade your number 1 overall pick that got you to a Super Bowl and Jared Goff for a player that is just putting up stats and nothing. Like, shouts out to both teams, man. Shouts out to the Rams. Shouts out to the Bengals. I don't know. I will say this, man. People keep saying that the Bengals are young. They'll get back. You don't know that. We don't know that. Because if you look in the AFC, man, that is a hell of a gauntlet, man. You have Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. You have Justin Herbert and the LA Chargers. You have Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. Hell, you have, even though they're not as good, but you have Derek Carr in the in the Vegas Raiders. So, and if they don't address, and it's not just get players for the offensive line. If you don't get the right players, then it's hard for me to see. I mean, yes, you have incredible young talent in Joe Burrow, an incredible young talent young talented offensive core in Joe Mixon and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. And that drop from Tyler Boyd was probably, and that was his first drop since like 2020. The drop that was on like the 3rd down, that was a huge play. Because Cincinnati, the Rams just scored. Cincinnati was driving down the field. They were trying to snatch the momentum back, and Tyler Boyd drops it. Now, I'm not blaming him for the loss, but that was a huge moment. But back to what I was saying, the Cincinnati Bengals have, again, it'd be different if it'd be different if, it'd be different if their offensive line wasn't as bad. But again, in the AFC alone, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, see what happens with Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, Derek Carr, Mac Jones, Justin Herbert, the Tennessee Titans defense, the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, and TJ Watt. The Indianapolis Colts defense with DeForest Buckner and Darius Leonard. Arguably, possibly Aaron Rodgers in if he goes to Denver. So, yeah, man, it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough. Do I think that they'll be exciting for years to come? Of course, but when they said, "Oh, we'll be back," I don't know. Oh, and the Super Bowl halftime show was great. It was incredible. Everybody did their thing. Look here. I've had my gripes about Eminem. I think back in the day, the Marshall Mathers LP, back in the day, Eminem was an incredible rapper. And I'm not saying, when we talk about Marshall Mathers LP, the Eminem Show, Slim Shady LP, Encore, Eminem has some incredible. Eminem's a great rapper, one of the best rappers of all time. But it's been a while, man, since, in my opinion, Eminem just be rapping. When I say he just be rapping, Eminem be rapping fast. He don't be talking about nothing. He just be rapping. He has some of the worst lines I've heard in a while. I mean, I'm not gonna say some of these lines, but they're just bad. I say all that to say, first and foremost, I just knew it. I knew that he was gonna play Lose Yourself. Somebody said on Twitter, which is gold, that Lose Yourself for white people is what Dreams and Nightmares is for black people, and I lost it. Like I went, oh man. But he took a knee, bruh. Get up. I'm not saying, just no. I'm not saying don't take a knee. I'm not saying like. I'm not saying, oh, he took a knee and it's horrible. Like he's no. I'm saying get up because, bruh, it was already announced that you were gonna do it, so it's not like the shock factor's there. Even though the league told you not to do it, it's not the shock factor's not there. So just get up, bro. Get up. Get up. But the whole Super Bowl was the Super Bowl halftime was great. Dr. Dre was great. Kendrick Lamar was great. 50 Cent came, and for people that don't understand why 50 Cent was hanging upside down, you might as well just get out. Just leave the podcast now. If you're following me, just unfollow me, bro. It's okay. In the club will be I will play that at my wedding. I promise you. Weddings for men. There's weddings are usually for women, of course, or usually for women. If we're talking about traditional marriages, it's usually for them to look good. It's usually for them to do the dress. Marriages are for the women to be the most important figure at the place. Like that's why the woman usually looks 10 times better than the man. That's why the woman takes more care of her hair and the face. Weddings are for the women. So with that, because of that, there's not a lot of now. Of course, men can have input, and men should have input. It shouldn't just be the women planning everything. But usually, the best way to do it is just go with the flow. If that's what you like, if that's what your significant other likes, just go give it to them. Allow them to feel special. So there are a lot of negotiables when we talk about what a man wants. Because if it's not exactly what the woman wants, more than likely it's not happening. I have 2 non-negotiables. Everything else, from the venue to the date, everything, you can do that. I have 2 non-negotiables. I'm wearing a white suit, or at least a white coat with black pants. I'm wearing that. I'm wearing a white suit. And I'm also In the Club by 50 Cent is playing. That is arguably my favorite song of all time. I am playing that at my wedding. I know I just went on a tangent, but hey, just saying. But yeah, Kendrick Lamar was great. Dr. Dre was great. Snoop Dogg was great. Mary J. Blige was great. 50 Cent was great. Eminem played Lose Yourself. So it was good. I don't think people are saying it was the greatest halftime show ever. Chill out. I mean, that man Prince was playing Purple Rain in the rain. And from, all the behind the scenes videos that came out, apparently all the technology, all the sound equipment, everything was just going to hell due to the rain. And Prince still put on one of the greatest performances of all time. Beyonce with Bruno Mars and I think Kendrick, that. Come on, man. So no, I don't know. I'm not gonna say that it was the greatest of all time. I'm just gonna say that it was incredible, and one of the best that I've seen. Not the best, but one of the best. So that was a Super Bowl, man. That was a Super Bowl again, and congratulations and shouts out to the Rams for winning 23-20 the Super Bowl. Shouts out for Cooper Kupp for winning the final Super Bowl MVP. If Aaron Donald does retire, he will also go down still in the short amount of time that he's played as arguably the best defensive player ever. Shouts out, man. Shouts out. There's still some football news to be had. I mean, there's pretty much a war between Kyler Murray and the Cardinals. No team, especially a team that had a successful regular season, no team wants to go out the way that the Cardinals went out. It was just completely bad. Like, nothing worked for the Cardinals. Kyler Murray was horrible. The running game was horrible. The defense was horrible. Buda Baker got hurt. No team, and I think the worst part is people were expecting this. Remember, I always said, let me just hold off, because the Cardinals are always like this. The Cardinals always have a high, and then they just crash at the worst time, and that's exactly what happened. So because of that, now you're having, I think, anonymous sources are pretty much saying, anonymous sources in the Arizona organization is pretty much airing out the dirty laundry between, their relationship and Kyler Murray. Pretty much making Kyler Murray the reason why they lost. Kyler Murray said he's being scapegoated. It's bad. I will say this though. Cardinals, be very careful what happens. I'm not saying that Kyler Murray is the best quarterback, but he is a really good quarterback. And you can be in this. There's a lot of different situations you can be in without Kyler Murray. That's all I'm saying. And yes, Kyler Murray needed to play better and should have played better in the playoff game. But he still had. I think he was like second in QBR in the regular season, behind like Joe Burrow or something like that. All I'm saying is be careful what you ask for. Or be careful, because there could be a life without Kyler Murray on the team. And while I'm not saying Kyler Murray's the best best quarterback, he's not the worst. I mean, he's a very good quarterback, actually. I will say that. So, ooh. And then we go over to Carson Wentz. Man. So reports came out saying that Carson Wentz and the Indianapolis Colts are trying to either cut him or trade him by like the trade deadline. Oh no, by like March 3rd or something. It's crazy how just Yeah, you remember, I was one of the people that said Dan Orlowski, who was very vocal about Matthew Stafford. Dan Orlowski, one of the people that was talking about Carson Wentz, saying that this could be a huge move. Carson Wentz had some moments, but Carson Wentz has turned into the quarterback that you cannot win with them as their starting quarterback. At least win big, because the Indianapolis Colts made huge moves this year, like with their defense, with their running game. A lot of people said all they needed was a quarterback, and they didn't even make the playoffs when they had like a 90% chance, and they lost to the Jags the final game because of how bad Carson Wentz played. Now, I'm not saying it's all because of Carson Wentz, but mainly it was because of Carson Wentz. So I don't know. I mean, I'm hearing maybe Washington. I don't know. That's crazy that I'm hearing that the two quarterbacks that are pretty much like on Washington's radar is Carson Wentz and Jimmy Garoppolo. And they're willing to give a first round pick, that 11th pick. I don't know, man. It sucks for Carson. It sucks for Carson. We are never seeing the MVP caliber Carson again. I don't believe it. I mean, because you thought this was the year to do that, because you're pairing him back with Frank Reich, who when they were last together, Carson Wentz had his best season. And you thought it was a mental thing. Okay, you're pairing back with Frank Reich. He's familiar with Frank Reich. They have a strong relationship. This should be good. we should get Carson Wentz the MVP. There was a time when he was the clear cut MVP until he got hurt. So you think, all right, you pair him with Frank Reich back. You have a good offensive line. You have a great running game. You have a great defense. You have pieces. You have, Michael Pittman. Like, you have great pieces around him, and Carson Wentz still crap the bed. I don't know what's... I'm not saying this is it for Carson Wentz, because Carson Wentz can still be a serviceable quarterback, but it's kind of been proven now that you're not a Super Bowl caliber team with Carson Wentz, and that is because you had everything that you say. When you look at Lamar Jackson, you say, what does Lamar Jackson not have? Lamar Jackson doesn't really have a solid number one receiver. It could be Rashad Bateman. It's definitely not Hollywood Brown. Right now, his number one target is Mark Andrews, who's a tight end. People say that if he just gets a number one receiver, that'll just completely open up the Ravens' offensive attack. And they could even be better, or they could, with all the people coming back from injury, they could be a hell of a lot better and have a hell of a lot better chance of making the Super Bowl if he just gets a number one receiver that can create separation. Carson Wentz has that. Michael Pittman. Hell, he has a decent number two right now in Zach Pascal. So that's why it just feels like it seems like Carson Wentz. If Carson Wentz is your starting quarterback, you're not a Super Bowl contending team, because you can have everything. The Indianapolis Colts have everything that you need, everything, and they didn't even make the playoffs. They have everything. They have a number one receiver. They have a number one running back. They have an incredible defense. An incredible secondary, a good coach, a good offensive line, and they still didn't make the playoffs. So, yeah. If Carson Wentz is your starting quarterback, you're not a championship team because of Carson Wentz. And lastly, before we go, shouts out to Israel Adesanya for beating Robert Whittaker by unanimous decision. Actually, never mind. Beating unanimous decision. This is what his 11th straight win in the middleweight division. He did go up and lost, and that's his only one loss. And a lot of people are saying that he could be arguably the greatest middleweight UFC fighter of all time. The numbers pretty much speaks for itself. I think he's pretty much rivaling Anderson Silva at this point. And he did beat Anderson Silva. Now, of course, it was the latter half of Anderson Silva's career, but shouts out to Israel Adesanya. Now, I will say that I don't know. There's a lot of controversy, not saying that he didn't deserve to win, but I don't know if it was a unanimous decision. I know Robert Whittaker, especially like the fourth round, probably the fourth and fifth round, I think he was good enough to at least win those rounds. Again, I don't think that I have no problem with Israel Adesanya. I think he did win, but I just don't think it should have been a unanimous decision. I think that one judge gave Israel off 5 rounds, and I don't see that. So I'm not saying the controversy should be did he win, because I think he deserved to win. I just don't think it should have been a unanimous decision. But shouts out to Israel Adesanya for winning 11 straight middleweight. Is it weatherweight? Middleweight championships or middleweight belts. So Uh, definitely, uh, definitely deserved. So, and there you have it. I was gonna talk about James Harden, like who has more pressure between James Harden and Ben Simmons, but I don't need to do that. We already talked about it. Both players did report to the teams. James Harden, so James Harden's not playing till All-Star break or till after All-Star break, so he's out, and I think they've replaced him with Jared Allen, which I'm not mad at. I do believe it probably should have went to Jaylen Brown, but I'm not mad. You have two players from Cleveland. The All-Star game's in Cleveland, so I'm not upset with it. But yeah, there you have it. That's been today's episode of the Unpopular Podcast. I appreciate you guys. If you want an Unpopular Podcast shirt, hoodie, sweater, long sleeve, jogger, the link is in the description below. I have multiple different designs, multiple different colors. So whatever you want, I got you. Just click on it, buy it, and we here. We got you. Also, please subscribe to wherever you're listening. Please subscribe to wherever you're watching. If you can, leave a comment, leave a like. If you're listening to it, give it a review, rate it, or whatever it is. I'm trying to get more people to experience the Unpopular Podcast. I'm trying to get more people to hear me, to see me, whether on YouTube and watching the visuals. If you're on Apple or whatever you get your podcast, it should be there. Leave a comment, leave a like. We'll chat back and forth about it because I do be in the comments and I do like to communicate with people. So, yeah, let's just try to get the algorithms going for the Popular Podcast if you can. And again, I appreciate you guys, and I hope that you have a great day. And until next time, much love.